Well, let's look at some of the people that are in the cemetery that in a way are linked with the Charles River or with Parklands. So tell us about our friend Frederick Olmsted here.
No, no,
That's not him?
No, this is Longfellow.
Oh, okay.
No, and
Similar beard.
I will take this opportunity to correct a frequent mistake. Actually, Olmsted had no role in designing. We were well before Olmsted. And Olmsted actually was cremated at Mount Auburn, but he's buried in Hartford, Connecticut.
I see.
Now,
So
this is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, whose estate, of course, was along the parkland. And I often get the question, well, who are the famous people buried at Mount Auburn? And most people have heard of Longfellow. But I like to say that we have Longfellow, the great poet, but we also have the locksmith that he wrote the poem about, under the spreading oak tree, or whatever it is. But he used to walk, I understand, from Cambridge to Boston frequently, across the river. And his family plot is one of our most visited. We have a nice relationship with the National Park Service, who run the Longfellow site, and we have an annual birthday party for him at Mount Auburn.
and he wrote, of course, a wonderful poem
Yes.
dedicated to the
Yes.
Charles River.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very moving poem. And then we have
Well,
somebody.
this is Charles Eliot's father. You mentioned the founder of the trustees. This, shown as a young man, was the great President Eliot of Harvard, that transformed what was essentially a small college into a great university. And of course, we have Eliot Bridge, which leads you from Boston to Mount Auburn, and he is buried at Mount Auburn
Yeah.
with his family.
And while he was president at Harvard, he actually wrote a book about his son, who died very young,
Yes.
very sadly, and described in this book, which in many ways is a travel book, of how his son, the landscape architect, traveled, for instance, to Hamburg and saw the parks along the Ulster and said, this is what we need along the Charles.
Yeah.
So the father, in a way, was also part of this effort to make the parklands along the Charles such an important experience for all of us. Now, here you,
This distinguished-looking gentleman was president of Harvard, Abbot Lawrence Lowell, and of course Lowell House at Harvard is named for him, and he was responsible for getting the river houses built. His family plot is particularly interesting because it's still has the original iron fence around it, and his siblings, all of whom are distinguished people in their own right, as well as his parents, and it's a whole family lot, and you see the history of the Lowell family right there.
yeah, building those houses to the river was quite a bold move away from Harvard Yard, because the river at the time was still very
Not very pleasant. Yeah,
not
no,
very pleasant. No.
Well, and this next gentleman was one of the people who, working with Longfellow and others, this is Henry Higginson, in his, I guess, Civil War uniform, came back and did so much for Boston, not only founding the Boston Symphony, but instrumental in getting Soldiers Field established, which is across the river from Mount
Yeah.
Auburn, but such an important part of the parklands today.
And Soldiers Field, where now think of it as the place where the Harvard Stadium is,
Right.
that was right in the view line of Longfellow's house. Longfellow's house reached all the way to the river. And then I think Higginson and Longfellow and some others purchased that land because they proposed an abattoir there, I understand. So the idea of having an abattoir right on your front yard was, even if it has a nice French name, wasn't very attractive.
No. So we at Mount Auburn would certainly grateful to him as well for
Yes.
making our environs better.
Yeah, and it was, I think, to honor those who have
His-
fallen in the
his
war.
Civil War
Yes.
comrades.
Yes. And here you have somebody
Well, this
who has-
magnificent portrait, which often hangs in the Boston Athenaeum, of Thomas Hanseated Perkins, for whom the Perkins School for the Blind is named. That originally started in Boston in Mr. Perkins' home, but eventually, of course, moved out and is one of the features of the Charles River landscape. But he is buried under a wonderful stone dog carved by Horatio Greeno, one of our great sculptors.
Under a dog.
Lying, guarding the tomb.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Now, you also brought a picture of this lake
Well,
here.
this is the quintessential shot of the Mary Baker Eddy tomb. It's a wonderful picture of the beauty of Mount Auburn, in this case, the fall season. We have 3 ponds, all of which drain into the Charles, but it's just a quintessential Mount Auburn landscape.
Now, I know people come here for the landscape, for the beauty, no picnicking, but just and strolling. But give us a bit of a sense of when somebody comes on a beautiful spring day, are they programs that help visitors understand what's there?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that. We have recently opened a visitor center in Story Chapel, which has a wonderful set of exhibits that put Mount Auburn into a context. There are resource materials there. There's docents there that can give you information. In the gatehouse, which goes back to the original 1835 period, there are a wide array of interpretive materials, and we are in the process of seeking grants to make a much more sophisticated opportunity for visitors to get information through computers and other things. But there's a wide array of literature to pick up.
And there, of course, I get your emails, and you announce tours
Yes,
of visiting poets, visiting activists. I know you even had a reenactment of Julia Ward Howe.
Well, thanks to you, Renata.
For the woman who started Mother's Day. So there are all kind of different ways to discover the Mount Auburn Cemetery by through the people
Right.
that are buried there.
If you go to our website, mountauburnallspelledout.org, you'll find a calendar of events. And we have about 50 or 60 public programs. I know we have the open house coming up, Arbor Day, all through the year. There are ways to learn more about Mount Auburn as well as the people buried there.
You mentioned Arbor Day. I mean, many people go there because, in a way, it's like an arboretum.
It
there's
is an arboretum.
A lot of very special trees,
Right.
and there's some labeling of trees as well.
Yes, many of them are labeled with display labels. They're all labeled with horticultural labels, and we work very closely with the Arnold Arboretum and other botanical gardens around the country. The current president of Mount Auburn, Dave Barnett, was president of the National Botanical Garden Association. And so I would say that first and foremost, the birders here might disagree with me, but it is a horticultural landscape is what its true significance is.
Well, maybe the birds are attracted by the
Well, they go together.
by the
Yes,
trees,
absolutely.
and you know.
But as you can see here,
There's
we
some
are
serious birding.
overrun starting about now and for the next 6 weeks or so as the warblers come through on their annual migration. Of course, we have birds all year round, those who are residents as well, hawks and other interesting birds. But it's the warbler migration that brings out the big crowds.
And as a birder once described to me, it's the birds follow the river. They follow the river, and then there you have as you describe it, the ritz right there.
Right.
The bird ritz right there, and
Well, this is
safe.
where the topography helps, because the birders can get up on the slopes of Consecration Dell, and they're sort of almost at the same level in the trees. And before the leaves come out, the birds, which are very, very small, the warblers, are much more easily seen.